Hello, I'm Reverend Scott Wipperman, pastor here at First Presbyterian Church in Helena, Montana, and we welcome you to our worship service today. I'd like you to know that regardless of who you are or where you are in your journey of faith, you're welcome here at First Presbyterian Church. Our Old Testament reading today comes from Lamentations. Okay, good. Yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Because of the Lord's great love, we're not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. I say to myself, the Lord is my portion, and therefore I will wait for him. The Lord is good to those whose hope is in him. To the one who seeks him is good. It is good to wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. And from the Gospel of Luke, we have a reading from the 17th chapter. We come into one of his parables that's not one of his most popular parables today. The apostle said to the Lord, "Increase our faith." And he replied, "If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mulberry tree, 'Be uprooted and planted in the sea,' and it will obey you." Suppose one of you had a servant plowing or looking after the sheep. Would he say to the servant when he comes from the field, "Come along now and sit down to eat"? Would he not rather say, "Prepare my supper. Get yourself ready and wait on me while I eat and drink. And after that, you may eat and drink"? Would he thank the servant because he did what he was told to do? So you also, when you have done everything you were told to do, should say, "We are unworthy servants. We have only done our duty." In the name of the Lord. Well, we read from Lamentations today. And what is a lamentation, a lament? It is a passionate appeal for some disappointment or some suffering or something that's going on. But we also talk about hope. And what is hope? Hope is the anticipation of something that we desire to happen will come about. The anticipation that something good will come about. There's a children's story. It's entitled The Hello Goodbye Window. And in this story, some parents take their child and take it to the grandparents. And they drop it off at the grandparents that day. And the child has a wonderful time. Grandma and she bake cookies. And her grandfather and she go down in the shop and build and paint a birdhouse. And she has a wonderful time there. And late in the afternoon, grandfather says, "Why don't you go look out the window and see what might be happening?" And lo and behold, she goes and looks out the window and sees her parents arriving. These grandparents know how to text. And he sees the parents arriving, or she sees the parents arriving, and she's happy and joyful that they've come because now she gets to go home again. But at the same moment, she's a little sad because she has to leave the grandparents, and she has a good time and likes them too. And the child learns that it's possible to be happy and sad at the same time. And in today's reading, Jeremiah is talking about the fact that he is lamenting. But it's possible to be in lament and to have hope at the same time. Then why is Jeremiah lamenting? Well, at this time, the people of Jerusalem, of Zion, have been taken into captivity by the Babylonians. They're in exile in Babylon. And they're mourning the fact that this city that was so grand is now sitting there in destruction, empty. There's no more festivals in the city. The streets that lead to the city even mourn over the fact that no one is coming to the city, that she's sitting there in disgrace. But that's not the only thing that Jeremiah is lamenting. He is lamenting the suffering that is taking place, but he's also lamenting why that suffering is taking place. What did the people of Zion do that brought about this suffering? Now, on the license plate of my car, I have a quote from Micah 6:8. It's a popular one. It says, "What should we do? Well, we should walk humbly with the Lord. That we should live in mercy." And it's something that we often like to remember, and you might see quoted often. You'll hear people talking about it. What has he shown you, O mortal? What is good? And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your Lord. And we quite often stop right there. That's verse 8. But if we go on to verses 9 through 17, we get another message of what's going on here at this time. And this is the Lord speaking through Micah. "Am I still to forget, O wicked house, your ill-gotten treasures? Shall I acquit a man with dishonest scales, with a bag of false weights? Her rich men are violent, her people are liars, and their tongues speak deceitfully. Therefore I've begun to destroy you, to ruin you, because of your sins." And he isn't the only prophet that says these things at this time to the people of Israel. Amos said, Hear this word, O you cows of Bashan, you women who oppose the poor and crush the needy, and say to your husbands, Bring us some drinks. The sovereign Lord has sworn by his holiness, the time will surely come when you will be taken away with hooks. And Jeremiah himself, speaking for the Lord, said, Like cages full of birds, their houses are full of deceit. They've become rich and powerful and have grown fat and sleek. Their evil deeds have no limit. They do not plead the case of the fatherless to win it. They do not defend the rights of the poor. Should I not punish them for this? These are the things that were going on in the society, at least the upper crust of the society, in this time leading up to before the exile. And as we all know, actions have consequences. And the consequence of their actions were ultimately that they were taken in exile and suffering. Now, we certainly can lament today, right? All kinds of strange things are going on in Tulsa and San Diego and South Carolina, in malls all over town, Washington, San Diego, in Houston, and in Illinois. We have wars in Syria, in Yemen. It's coming up to election time, and we're getting a zillion emails asking for donations. There's all kinds of suffering taking place. And we might lament all these things. But are we lamenting what we might be doing, where we might individually or corporately be becoming involved in bringing about this suffering, and bringing about this injustice, this oppression, this meanness, this unkindness? Because as Jeremiah knew, the people of Zion, the upper crust of Zion, weren't lamenting that fact. until it caught up with them, and they were in exile, and they were suffering, and then they were lamenting. But in the midst of this, Jeremiah says that, "Yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope." In the midst of this lamenting, Jeremiah has hope. Hope that the suffering might be relieved. Hope that we might walk on the right paths. We are sinners, but we are forgiven sinners. We're not consumed because of the Lord's anger. We're not consumed because of the Lord's great love and compassion. I believe it was Einstein said that his greatest fear is that God was a just God, meaning we'd get what we deserved. But Jeremiah assures us that God's compassion and grace will prevent us from being consumed. We're surrounded by a love that endures the most cantankerous opposition. A love that stands up to oppression and contempt and opposition by forgiveness and a refusal to seek revenge. God saves us not because of the works that we have done, but because God chooses to save us. The purpose of salvation is that each believer might produce a life of obedience to God rather than to self. And this is God's plan, not because of any human merit. We have hope because Christ destroyed the basis of our suffering. Death has been destroyed, and light has been brought into its place. And we have hope because, like the disciples cried out, "Give us more faith." And they were right in making this request. They might not have known it, but they were on good theological ground in doing this. Because faith is a gift to us. There's no self-help book that we can do for us to create more faith. No idiot's guide to the faith that we can go pick up on the bookstore shelf. Faith is a gift. And they were asking for more faith. But what did Jesus do? He came back and said, if you have the faith of a mustard seed, the tiniest bit of faith, you can do marvelous things. But if you look at the Greek here, the Greek is a little odd. It's a little convoluted. It's a little strange organization. And it implies a contradiction question. It's like saying, if you have faith, comma, but of course you do, comma, then you can say to this mulberry tree, get up and be planted in the sea. Or as we more commonly hear in Matthew, you can say to this mountain, get up and move over there. And granted, mountains are more massive than mulberry trees, right? So moving a mountain might seem to be a grander scale of something. But we do have machines and dynamite and stuff like this. We can take a mountain and we can destroy it bit by bit and haul it over there and put it over here. But picking up a mulberry tree and planting it in the sea and having it grow and thrive in the sea, this is the most magnificent of things that could be done. And with just a little bit of faith, we can do that. And then Christ goes on. And essentially he tells us, are we sitting by the rivers of Babylon with our harps silent, our spirits broken, lamenting our suffering about what's going on wrong here? We may start there, but we won't remain there because there's hope. Hope enters. This text from Luke compels us to get out from under that weeping willow and go move some mulberry trees. This is a get up off your behinds moment that Jesus is giving us here. Because he's telling us in this strange parable, do what you're supposed to do. Now, if we are doing wrong, if we're sinning big time, making a great occupation out of this, and we turn and start doing good, well, that's a nice thing, isn't it? And people may compliment us on doing the right thing as opposed to doing the wrong thing. I mean, we all like to be complimented when we do a good job. We all like to be told we do things well for ourselves. But Jesus says, no, you're just doing what you're supposed to have been doing in this parable. So go do it. With a little bit of faith, you have the power to do amazing things. We are not hopeless. As Timothy says, God has not given us a spirit of timidity, but a spirit of power, a spirit of love, a spirit of self-discipline. We're not destined and required to do what we've done before if we've been oppressing others, if we've been blocking justice. We are free to choose a new path. We can walk in the faith that Christ has given us. We may be lamenting what's happening around us, the consequences of the actions that we collectively have taken, but this does not preclude us from being filled with hope, because we are loved. Loved beyond our imagination, loved beyond what we can comprehend. And God is compassionate, and we are forgiven. And the tiniest bit of faith enables us to do the most unimaginable things. So, if you have the faith of a mustard seed, and of course you do, ...